Well, the number 666 is pretty famous, or I suppose you could say infamous. 666 is called the number of the beast. And the reason that the number 666 has become infamous, it's not just because it's some kind of nice number, it has got a lot of interesting mathematical properties.
Perhaps disappointingly, mathematically, 666, not that special.
But it's famous because of its use in the Bible, where it is the number of the beast. Let me read the relevant passage.
The one thing that I do know where it turns up is in the game of roulette. So roulette, here's a roulette table. This is the Monte Carlo roulette table.
Let him who has understanding reckon the number of the beast, for it is a human number. Its number is 666.
There's an American roulette table as well, which is slightly different. The American table has a 0 and a double 0, whereas the Monte Carlo roulette table just has the 1 0.
The New Testament, the Bible, wasn't written in English. This is just a translation. So in the original Greek manuscripts, the number is actually written as 3 letters. The Greeks didn't have symbols for writing numbers. They used letters instead. It's the same as if in English we had to use the letter A for 1, the letter B for 2, and so on. Greek is like this. It uses letters to represent numbers. Hebrew is like this. Letters are used to represent numbers. And those are the 2 main languages of the Bible.
So all roulette tables, though, use the numbers 1 to 36. So here, the Monte Carlo roulette table has 37 slots, 0, 1, 2, 3, up to 36.
So alpha, the first letter of the Greek alphabet, represents the number 1. Beta, the second letter, represents number 2. Gamma, the third letter, represents number 3. Now, if we carried on like this, we wouldn't be able to form big numbers very easily. So then, as we go on, the letter iota comes to represent 10. Kappa is 20. And then we've got to now go to our hundreds. So rho, which is the equivalent of our letter R, represents 100. Sigma, the next letter, just like we go RS, rho sigma in Greek, 200. Now what this means that every word also has a numerical value.
The Monte Carlo table was invented by a man called Francois Blanc. In fact, the first version of roulette was invented by a mathematician called Blaise Pascal. A really early version of the idea. He's a brilliant French mathematician, really interesting life. But the version I want to talk about is the Monte Carlo roulette table. So Francois Blanc invented this, and they say that he made a deal with the devil for the secrets of roulette, because the numbers of a roulette table add up to 666.
So for example, my name is Pete. Pi, famous mathematical symbol, which is the first letter of my name, which would be 80. So pi, P for Pete, 80. Epsilon, an E, that would be 5. Tau, a T, that would be 300. And finally another E, 5. So the number of my name is 390.
It is just a coincidence. It's a nice little funny story told by gamblers who have perhaps suffered at the hands of the roulette table. 666 then, if it is the sum of consecutive numbers, 1 to 36, that means it's also known as a triangle number. That's what a triangle number is. Let's have a look at those.
Okay, so in the Bible, the famous number 666 comes in Revelation chapter 13. This calls for wisdom. Let him who has understanding reckon the number of the beast, for it is a human number. Its number is 666. Now in English, this word reckon actually comes from a Greek word which means calculate. So it's almost like the text is saying, I'm going to give you a riddle. You need to calculate the number of the beast, okay? This number, 666, actually relates to a name. Now, in Greek, this is called isosophy, the idea that a name can be a number as well, or a number can be a name. And in Hebrew thought, the same idea is called gematria, which actually relates to our English word geometry. It has the same Greek origin. Many people have seen the book of Revelation as directed against the Roman Empire. So when it comes to calculating the number of the beast, this evil figure within the book, many have then presumed that this figure must be something to do with the empire, and in particular, its particularly evil leader, Nero. So the way that this is calculated from the number 666 is to take the letters of Nero Caesar. But a slight complication is that the letters are actually written in Hebrew and not Greek. The reason for that is it's often in Jewish thought, in Hebrew thought, that the idea of making letters and numbers or making names from numbers has some significance. One way to write Nero Caesar in Hebrew is like this. Now, just like in Greek, each letter corresponded to a number. The same is true in Hebrew. So the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Aleph. So this corresponds to number 1. Beit corresponds to number 2. And then we move into our tens as well. So Yod corresponds to number 10. Resh corresponds to 200. So we have a very similar system. Both the Greeks and Hebrew language use letters to represent numbers. So this says Nero Caesar in Hebrew. The N, is number 50. The R, the Resh, is 200. Okay. Vav is 6. Nu is 50. Kof is 100. Samek is 60. And then Resh is 200. Now, if you add up all of these, we come to 666. So Nero Caesar, the name Nero Caesar, has a numerical value of 666. Why is it spelt slightly funnily? We've got here N-R, the equivalent of O-N. So we've got Nerone Caesar. The reason for that is that the Greek way of writing Nero Caesar was Nerone Caesar. I think this is the most obvious explanation, partly because there are other examples at the time in other Hebrew and Greek texts of this kind of riddle, the idea of a number representing a name. It's convincing because this Nerone Caesar, this particular spelling, is in common use. And also, John, as an author, uses very Hebraic concepts. He draws on a lot of Hebrew ideas. Some people argue that Greek is his second language. He thinks in Hebrew, but he writes in Greek. So he's imbued with Hebrew ideas. But also, it adds to the kind of the complexity of it in terms of it being a riddle, a secret. So no one wants to write a book under imperial persecution saying, oh, the root of all evil is Nero Caesar. You're not going to spell that out. So this is kind of a way that the number system of the time can be used as a code to kind of protect the author, protect the recipients from an out-and-out criticism.
A triangle number then can be written like a triangle. Here I'm going to take some dots and write them in a triangle. And you see, each row is a different number. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So the first triangle number is just 1 on its own. The second triangle number is the first 2 rows there. So 1 plus 2, which is 3. The third triangle number is this triangle, 1, 2, 3, which is 6. The fourth triangle number is that, and so on and so on. And the 36th triangle number, so the very last row would have 36 dots on it, would be the 36th triangle number. That is 666.
666 has been used to indicate virtually anything. But anyone who's been evil, an evil ruler or so on, has been found to add up somehow to the number of 666 using all sorts of bizarre counting systems. What generally happens is that people take the English alphabet, A to Z, and use the numbers 1 to 26 to try and come up with some code. But you can see that that's actually nothing like the genuine way that Hebrew and Greek use their numbers, because there in Hebrew and Greek we get units, tens and hundreds, whereas these codes that tend to be made up these days use just the number 1 to 26, A to Z. And then they involve all sorts of bizarre things like adding people's middle names and so on to come up with present day figures.
Of course, we know about the associations with 666, but mathematically speaking, it's not a particularly interesting, exciting number for its own sake. It's more of a cultural important number.
What's very interesting about this 666 is that some manuscripts, some other early manuscripts from the 3rd century and so on, actually have the number 616. So the number of the beast in these texts is 616. Now what's interesting is that if you take off this final N in Hebrew and have just Nero Caesar, that equals 616. So in other words, people are saying, I already know that the answer is Nero Caesar, but I'm not sure about how you worked it out. I'm going to correct it if you like. I think the number ought to be 616. So in a way that confirms that they were thinking of Caesar, Nero Caesar, even from the 2nd, 3rd century and so on, really early on. So that's a nice bit of evidence that confirms that certainly among the early Christians, the answer to this riddle was Nero Caesar.
The digits, you either end up down here at 1, so you can consider this like a tree, so I call this the hapification tree.
One more
and it all grows out of 1, or you end up in this coil, right? And all the other...
We reach a familiar problem.
And
if
that
I want to
single
count
digit
to
number and a single digit number
256,
is 1.
here we go, I'm
This
going to
makes
add
my
1
number 7
to 255, so it carries here.